Welcome back, sailors. This is your captain speaking, and welcome to another episode of Bruise News. Today we finally got some information about what's going on with DILLISHAW, and it's pretty crazy. It might be one of the craziest steroid cases that have been in the UFC or really fight sports history. It's bigger than what happened with Alistair, in my opinion. It's bigger than what was announced with Chael or any of those other guys that were really on top, because in all terms, TJ was really on top of the sport. He was one of the guys that people were considering before the Cejudo fight to be the best MMA fighter in the sport. And you could really make that argument with him because of how good he actually was. Now, we do know that TJ has been banned for 2 years now. That's more than the NSAC had given him originally. Now it's 2 years after Nevada had come back and said that he was busted for erythropoietin. I think that's how it's pronounced. It's also known as EPO, and EPO is a steroid or anabolic steroid or stimulant that a lot of runners and a lot of track stars and a lot of bikers use. Lance Armstrong was busted for the same thing after he came back from his testicular cancer stuff. Regardless of that, it's a steroid that actually stimulates the red blood cells in the bone marrow. So it regulates oxygen a lot faster, meaning that your brain has far more activity, which means your reaction time, your speed, your cardio, your power, all of that stuff goes through the roof. Apparently, according to his team, his old team, and everybody else that's been around him, apparently he's been using it for a long time. And now they've been testing him more and testing his old samples, and his old samples have actually been coming back with that too. So you could look at TJ's entire career at this point as his legacy has been completely dismantled. As of today, the two Garbrandt fights that he won, they've been completely overturned. So as far as anyone is concerned, Garbrandt should be champion. And apparently there are rumors that Pedro Munoz, the guy he just lost to, apparently he is also being hit for an anabolic steroid, but further on that at some point once we know more information. So it could look like Cody is still undefeated. And honestly, there's a case that he could make that he's actually still the champion and should be awarded the belt, after Cormier was granted the same thing after Jones got popped. And Jones didn't get popped for steroids. Jones got popped for breaking the law. So I think that there's a huge thing, and it's especially in terms of performance enhancing. It means a lot, and it's completely ruined TJ. TJ has no leg to stand on at this point. According to the tests, he's been using steroids, or this steroid EPO, for years. This means that Dwayne Ludwig definitely knew about this stuff and snatched TJ up, knowing that he could have got by on those tests. He's ruined. Nobody's going to go to his gym after that, right? So TJ, I'm sure you're not going to watch this video, but what the hell are you doing, dude? What are you doing? The Renan Barão thing, you ruined people's careers with the defeats that you handed them. And it completely changed the whole staple of where that division was. You changed it. What's even crazier to me, though, is that after all of those years of him using that, there's one guy who's actually beaten TJ, aside from Cejudo. You could make the argument that the weight cut had a huge impact on TJ's loss. And it was a weird loss in the first place. Like, he wasn't knocked unconscious, and a lot of people argue that it was stopped early. Me, personally, I don't think so. I think Cejudo won that fight. But the only person who's really beaten TJ clean, went 5 rounds toe-to-toe with him, was Dominic Cruz. And Dominic Cruz now is probably looking at this, whoa, what happened? Or how good is Garbrandt? Because Garbrandt took it to Dominic Cruz. He absolutely dominated him from bell to bell. So there's a lot going on with that. It's a lot of craziness. TJ is trying to act normal all over Instagram and all over Twitter and stuff like that. It's a little bit, nobody feels sorry for you, dude. You tried to cheat and get away with it, and you were cocky about it, and now it's all coming out of the woodwork that your team was this way and your team was that way. Conor and Garbrandt actually had a little bit of Twitter talking going on, and I guess you could call it Twitter. They were tweeting at each other. Yeah, that's not wrong completely, I guess. We'll just chalk that up to a mistake. Anyways, they were talking to each other saying that Conor was like, respect to you, Garbrandt, for sticking by your team and knowing that TJ was a snake in the grass and not having his back, and the whole thing that happened between the two of them. And Cody was like, respect to you, and blah blah blah. I like seeing that stuff. Funny thing, the video of Conor smashing that phone's fan is actually out now, and you can watch it. And there's actually an argument I got with a friend of mine who doesn't watch my videos, so he might never see this anyways, because I'm pointing my finger at you, and hopefully I get a comment back for this. But he said that Conor was alone. Yeah, totally. It was 5 in the morning and Conor was alone. Yeah, that's not the case. He had like 17 camera dudes around him, and there was 3 people taking pictures of him, and he smashed one guy's phone. One dude. Conor, just another, reason why he's there. He's a great fighter, but the dude's got to pick up the pieces of his, character here, because he's not looking like a great human. Anyways, moving on, we have the UFC 236 predictions, and as usual, I go from bottom to top, ending with the main event, so we can talk about it a little bit. The first fight is OSP versus Nikita Krylov. It's an odd fight to call. Both guys are good strikers. Both guys are decent on the ground. OSP probably has the advantage standing up. He's a big light heavyweight, and he's known primarily for knocking people out, but he also lately has had a bit of a suspect for a chin. So I do think I'm going to take OSP round 1 TKO. I think that he's probably going to get it with a devastating head kick because he has really, really powerful legs. It seems like the most obvious choice in my opinion. I don't think it's going to be a fight that goes to decision. I don't see Krylov taking OSP down and doing that stuff, and I don't really see Krylov being able to do the short exchanges because he tends to try to fight from a distance himself, and that's bad news against a guy like OSP. Second fight on the card is Alan Jouban versus Beanie Seigel. A bit of an odd, toss in there, but this card is really, really good from top to bottom, and you're going to see a lot of good stuff. This card could end up being KOs from top to bottom. It could be all finishes. It could be. There's no way that all of these fights are going to decision. So if you want to see a good pay-per-view, this is one of the ones to definitely tune in for. Anyways, Alan Jouban versus Beanie. I have Jouban winning by unanimous decision. Just to throw it in my own face there. A little bit of water, a little bit of salt. Wake up, buddy. What are you doing? Just kidding. Alan Jouban is a really good striker. He's a good karate specialist. And I think that Beanie's got a good chin. Meaning that he's not as seasoned as a lot of the other guys. So he's going to be able to take a lot of the shots because he's young and he's hungry that Alan throws. I just don't think that he's experienced enough. And with his record, pointing at his record, because I don't actually know him that well, pointing at his record, pointing at how young he is and how fresh he is in the sport, I think that Jouban's probably going to get to him but not be able to finish him. Going on to the third fight, we have Eric Anders versus Khalil Roundtree. Now, this fight is pretty crazy because both of these dudes are going to throw heat at each other. They're going to throw some serious heat. This fight is going to be crazy. Expect a knockout. Expect it. I'm saying personally in the second round, if I was a betting man, I would bet that probably in the early second round, you'll probably see Eric Anders with a head kick KO. That's how he's got his other KOs. He'll probably jack him up with some hands and throw a nice kick and get him to the ground, TKO him with punches. Going on to the co-main event. This is where it gets really interesting. So we have Kelvin Gastelum, my boy. Called him winning the Ultimate Fighter as soon as I saw that. I gotta stop waving that pen in your guys' face. Anyways, Kelvin Gastelum versus Israel Adesanya. Now, this has been tearing up people's opinions all over the place. A lot of people think that Adesanya is a god and he's just going to roll through Kelvin Gastelum. Some people think that Kelvin Gastelum is just too well-rounded for Adesanya, and it's a tough thing to call because Adesanya has really shown that he is very, very good. He has no losses in the UFC. In kickboxing, I believe he's 22-6. He's been knocked out a few times. I was just watching a knockout of his that he was knocked out, and it was bad. He was knocked completely out cold. It was crazy. It's weird to see a guy like that because I'm watching him in MMA, and he's knocking everybody out, and then I watch him in kickboxing, and he's getting knocked out. So it's crazy to see that. Anyways, personally speaking, Kelvin is one of my favorite fighters. A lot of people call him a meathead, but he's not a meathead at all. He's very smart, and he knows the sport very well, and he's not cocky like Adesanya is. People try to say that Adesanya is humble. He's one of the least humble guys I've ever seen in my entire life. He's trying to do Dragon Ball Z moves in the octagon. Like, it's not like that isn't cool and fun, but that's not something that a humble person does. They don't pretend to do, like, stuff like that. They don't call themselves, they don't deem themselves this. They don't say that, oh, I was going to beat Anderson Silva the whole time I knew it. No, you didn't, okay? Anderson clearly wasn't in that I'm getting off topic. Anderson wasn't in that fight, really. I think that Anderson went out there and had some fun, and you couldn't finish him because Anderson is the GOAT. Anyways, Kelvin went toe-to-toe with Jacare, and Jacare would snap Adesanya in half. Jacare has a good chin, just like Kelvin does. He's got good hands. He's got nuts power. And on the ground, that's what he does. That's what he does. He snaps people in half. He subs everybody that he wants. If he wants to submit you, he's going to submit you. It's just the way that it is with Jacare. And Kelvin went toe-to-toe and ended up winning the fight against Jacare. So, not to use MMA math too much, but I think if Kelvin Gastelum can survive certain people, like, there's a lot of guys in the division that Kelvin has fought and he's lost against, like Weidman, who I also think would crush Adesanya. I think that Adesanya is a special case and he's a good kickboxer, but I do not think that on the ground he's well enough to survive. That's a huge thing, and with the middleweights, light heavyweights, and heavyweights the way that they are, having those points in your game is so important. You need to be able to wrestle. You need to have submissions. You need to have submission defense. And Adesanya is a pure striker, and he does not have the ground game. He has never fought somebody on the ground as well as good as he hasn't fought anyone on the ground. Let me word that better. He hasn't fought anyone on the ground who would scare you. If you were walking in somewhere and you were like, ooh, I hope I'm not facing this guy, none of those people would be who Adesanya has beaten. I worded that even terribly, but you get my point. Adesanya has not faced anybody good on the ground. And mark my words, Kelvin Gastelum is a guy who's so good on the ground, and he's beaten lots of amazing strikers because he's a good striker himself. He's a very good striker himself. So put that together with his ground game and his ability to wrestle, I think that he has the recipe for beating Adesanya, and I definitely think 100%, unless it's by some fluke, some miracle that Adesanya lands some crazy, crazy stuff, and he locks up on Kelvin Gastelum, he starts jacking him up, then I don't see Adesanya winning the fight. I have Gastelum winning by submission in the second round. Rear naked choke. Moving on to the main event. So this is an interesting fight too. These guys fought 7 years ago. Poirier was the winner. Max Holloway had only been in the UFC for 4 fights. It was his 4th fight or his 5th fight. I don't know off the top of my head right at this moment. I just know that it was very early on in his career. So there's a lot of cool pieces to this fight since they've fought before. Holloway said some cool stuff like, you handed me one of my first losses in the UFC. It's only fair that I give you back a loss. I like stuff like that. It's very playful. Sometimes I don't like Max because he comes across as cocky himself, but at the same time, he's just such an exciting kid to watch. He's so good and he knows the sport so well, but he's another guy who falls to that curse of how good is he on the ground. We haven't really seen him on the ground. Speaking of which, Poirier, when he beat Holloway, he beat him on the ground. The only other time that we've seen Holloway lose in the UFC was to Conor McGregor, and Conor McGregor is one of the best strikers, if not the best striker in the UFC. So the fact that your loss, one of your only losses, comes to Conor by losing the striking and by Poirier on the ground, you have to see where that kind of leaves Holloway. Did he train well enough on the ground? Is he better? Is Poirier still able to do that to him on the ground? The other factor that falls into place is Holloway is a slow starter. And I got into an argument with people about this before, and I told them that Holloway's output, his striking output from the first round to the second round and the third round is increased by 60%. His strike output is increased 60%. That's like going from 18 punches to 28 punches. That's a lot. That's a lot more output. I know it doesn't sound like a lot probably when I just said it that way, but it's actually a lot, because when you look at the fight, you don't see many fighters passing that 200 mark, throwing that 200 punch mark. But when you go 5 rounds, you're looking at getting there, and that's where Holloway, his round output just increases as the fight goes on. That's a huge problem for Poirier, because he tends to lose to fighters who have a high output, because he's a high output fighter. He's high velocity. But when he gets stuck, he tends to become a stick in the mud, and he stops throwing, he stops kicking, he stops doing anything. He likes to say that he's a savage, but he's really not. When people get on top of him, he's a lot like BJ Penn, and he tends to break. It's happened many times with Poirier before, and I do think that that's going to be the case. But if I was Poirier, I would go out there and I would try to finish Max as fast as possible. I would try to slow him down as fast as humanly possible. I would try to get him to the ground. I would try to outstrike him, go to the body immediately, and try to get Max to slow down so he's not as fast going into those other rounds, so that Max is more tired than Poirier is for those later rounds. Because that's very important, because if Max gets going and he starts throwing those high volume second, third, fourth rounds, he's going to win the fight. In fact, if I was a betting man, which I'm not, I would say that Holloway is going to win in the 3rd round, probably late 3rd round, by TKO. He'll get Poirier against the cage, and the ref will step in from too much damage being taken by Poirier. I think that Holloway is just going to outwork the man. The 1st round is probably going to end up being slow, which is the opposite way that it should go. Holloway will get going in the 2nd round, probably mid-2nd round. He'll start throwing heavy. The punch output will go up. And then by the 3rd round, I think that it'll be over. Probably, midway to end way of the fight. Anyways, I want to thank everybody for watching. It's a nice fat video. Not too many mistakes, but we still had some mistakes, because that's what you do. You make mistakes. You gotta learn from them. I'm doing my best here, people. We need more views. My last video did horribly compared to my other videos. So, I don't want to piss everybody off sending all of my friends these videos over and over again, and then all my friends are just the ones watching them. I would really, really love if all of my friends could share the video, talk about the video, show the video to their friends, post about the video, all that stuff. We need likes, we need shares, and we need subscribes here. I appreciate every one of you. Have a great day.